lightoftruth.com website and get the warning out while we still have time. This is the Light of Truth radio broadcast with Michael Boldea.
All right, welcome to the program, and thank you for joining us. This is the Light of Truth radio broadcast. I am your host, Michael Boldea, and as always, it is my distinct pleasure to be here with you for these, 60-odd minutes. Actually, it's more like 57, 56 minutes with the introduction and the outro and all that good stuff. But, about an hour, give or take, nonetheless, which is a lot more than actual radio because they have commercials and interruptions and all that jazz, so they do about 36 to 42 minutes. Just a little, inside baseball for you. But anyway, I always look forward to our time together. Truth be told, I cherish it, as I would fellowship. This platform allows me to process, to vent, to talk to you about what's going on in the world, knowing that you understand where I'm coming from, and that in the least, I have a sympathetic ear to bounce things off of and discuss certain, sensitive topics with. It seems nowadays everything's a sensitive topic. No matter what you want to talk about, no matter who you want to talk about it to, we've become so overly sensitive about everything. That we're like little children whose toys get taken away. We throw fits and we throw conniptions, and I don't know where we're going, but we're not headed in the right direction. As a civilization, not just in America, but wherever you go in the world, you've got fully grown adults acting like petulant children whenever they don't get their way. Whenever things don't turn out the way they want it to, it's not that they take their ball home and walk away. You know that old saying, take your ball and go home. They stab the other kid in the eye with a pencil. They throw the ball in the river. Then they go set their house on fire. It's a whole new level of strange. But here we are. And so we have to contend with reality as it is, not with what we would like things to be, not with how we would hope things would turn out. This is the reality as it is. This is the world that we're living in. And our duty as believers, as children of God, is to be in this world but not of it. There's a lot to unpack just in that idea, to be in the world, but not of the world. And in order for you and I not to be of the world, we must constantly be cleansed of the pollutants. We must constantly be cleansed of the grime and the dirt that tries to stick itself to us every time we walk out our front door. I know many of you don't see it this way. You don't see it as an ongoing battle, and I think that's detrimental. Because every time you walk out your front door, every time you finish your morning prayer and your morning meditation and your morning reading, every time you exit intimate one-on-one fellowship with God, from that instant, from that moment, the world is attempting to sully you. The world is attempting to make you of it. Because to the world, to the darkness, to death, you are a foreign body. You are seen as a malignancy. You are seen as a danger, as a disease. And the world tries everything it can to make you assimilate to it rather than it assimilate to your kind, to your likeness. And so this is the constant struggle. This is the constant back and forth. This is the battle. will we make this world into a more representative image of Christ, or will the world make us into a more representative itself? We are in the world, but not of the world. And the thing that's troublesome to me sometimes is that many believers choose to act as though they're not in the world or of the world. Nothing concerns them. Everything that's going on around them is not of a concern to them because in their minds they're not in the world. Well, guess what? You are. You're in the world. Don't be of the world. But if you can do something to affect change in the world to make it more into an image of the likeness of Christ, why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you take the opportunity to try and bring a little light to the darkness? Why wouldn't you take the opportunity to try and bring a little life to those who are dying? That's the question that I wrestle with. That's the question that I contend with. And this is why I don't understand some people and the indifference with which they go about life. Look, I try to balance this program the best way I know how, because I do believe in a balance of sorts. I do believe that we can know what's happening in the world, and I do believe that if we have the opportunity to affect some change for the good while still fleshing out spiritual topics and discussing spiritual things, then there's no reason that we shouldn't. These two things are not mutually exclusive. Knowing what's going on in the world and being spiritually astute are not mutually exclusive. Although to judge by some believers' demeanor, apparently they are. Because there's some in the church that are far too gullible. I got at least 6 forwards to a skit, I guess you can call it, by the Babylon Bee. If you see anything by the Babylon Bee, it's fake, it's a lie, it's not true. Now, the Babylon Bee put out this thing that said Creflo Dollar built himself a podium of $100 bills. And, I understand the righteous indignation, and if it was true, I'd be right there with you. I'd be as indignant. But it was something put out by the Babylon Bee. So no, Creflo Dollar didn't make himself a pulpit of $100 bills. Everybody needs to take a breath and calm down just a little bit. Does it make him any less sleazy? Of course not. But it's not my job to perpetuate a lie. Because if I perpetuate a lie often enough, then whenever I tell the truth, people won't believe me because they remembered all the lies that I perpetuated. So don't fall for everything. Don't be gullible. Do your research. And if you see Babylon Bee by an article, take it for what it is, a farce. So again, being wise in the ways of the world, knowing what is happening in the world, and being a spiritual person, and I hate using that word spiritual, but there I was, using the word spiritual, are not mutually exclusive. Talking about one doesn't mean you ought not to talk about the other. As I've said, balance is key. And I, for one, am the kind of person that if I see something in the news or something happening in this nation, and I know that it will affect the household of faith or adversely affect my children or my family, then yes, I'll talk about it even though my voice can be likened to a chirping beetle in a monsoon. Look, I'm self-aware enough to know that I don't have the biggest listening audience, but for the handful of you that listen, I hope to give you something substantive. I hope to give you something worthwhile. I hope to give you something that you can sink your teeth into and actually be compelled to think about. Because I don't just want you to take me at my word. I want you to mull it over, to chew on it, to contemplate it, to come to your own conclusion about certain things. And I realize full well that you might not always agree with my stance. You might not, always see things the way I see. You might often see it a different way. But regarding those things which are not salvific issues, we can agree to disagree. And this is another thing that the church seems to have forgotten somehow. If an issue is not salvific in nature, then we can agree to disagree. Look, I abhor the notion that all that we are supposed to be is a carbon copy of each other. I don't like the idea that we're all supposed to be in lockstep like some automaton from a bad sci-fi movie when it comes to things that are not of a salvific nature. I don't like chocolate ice cream. There, I said it, and I'm not apologizing for it. I do not like chocolate ice cream. Now, you can like chocolate ice cream. It's your prerogative. And because it's not a salvific matter, we can disagree on which is better. Personally, I'm a huge fan of pistachio ice cream. But that's just me. Me liking pistachio and you liking chocolate ice cream will do nothing, either of us, get into heaven. So we can each like our own ice cream and still be brothers in Christ. We get so busy just stabbing at each other over the insignificant things that the enemy just waltzes in through the front door because we're too distracted infighting and hurting each other over issues that in the end are utterly irrelevant as far as salvation is concerned. Look, the fact that I read out of a New King James version of the Bible will not keep me from entering God's rest. I'm sorry, but no matter how many individuals say otherwise, me reading out of the New King James, nope, won't keep me out of heaven. God's not that petty. Yes, it just came up again. This is why I'm talking about it. And I understand that the person is well-meaning, but I got a 4-page letter as to why I need to repent for reading out of the New King James and how I'm leading people astray. Sorry, but that's a pretty big leap there, don't you think? How did we go from disagreeing about which version of the Bible to read to leading people astray? It's like calling someone who pinched your ear a murderer. It's no surprise, really, is it? The rhetoric has gotten so over the top. It has gotten so overblown. And it's like this both in the church and without the church. No one seems to be able to make a rational, reasonable argument anymore. Logic is bleeding in the street. People just feel the need to strike out and injure and destroy and disqualify anyone who disagrees with them. And again, this isn't just happening in the world. This is happening in the church as well. And I'm going to say something that may irritate some, but it is the truth nevertheless. Your personal opinion or your feelings do not trump a rational argument. Nor are personal opinions or feelings rational arguments, no matter what the intellectually dishonest might say. I thought I'd vent a little because this kind of week is becoming commonplace, to be honest with you. And either I'm getting old and grumpy, or my patience is wearing thin. So it's one of the two. I don't know which yet, but yes, I'm getting old. And I am sometimes grumpy. So what happened this week? Ha-ha! Well, it's been an interesting week. If you've been keeping up, you already know. But do you remember a few weeks ago, we talked about Donald Trump killing the god of the left by pulling out of the Paris Climate Accord? Well, this week, he debunked the myth of the victim class, and he torpedoed the hopes and dreams of those who would make every branch of government a social experiment by banning the active duty of transgender persons in these United States. So the left's pet victims were just annihilated. And finally, thankfully, gloriously, there's someone in leadership that sees the situation for what it is. Look, transgenderism, or what is known in refined circles as gender dysphoria, is classified as a mental disorder. And that's not Mike saying it. It's leading psychiatrists, people who study human behavior and the human brain. Psychiatrists are saying that gender dysphoria is a mental disorder. I found this article from a couple years ago, and I'm sure that this doctor took a lot of flack. But as I read some snippets of this article, keep in mind that this man was the psychiatrist in chief for Johns Hopkins Hospital. Keep that in mind. Just let that just, ruminate. Let it marinate in the back of your mind. This man is the former psychiatrist in chief for Johns Hopkins Hospital. So we're not talking about, Bob's Mind Emporium. We're not talking about getyourheadonstraight.com. Psychiatrist in chief of Johns Hopkins, and the article begins by saying, as such, Dr. Paul R. McHugh, the former psychiatrist in chief for Johns Hopkins Hospital, and its current, listen to this, distinguished Surface Professor of Psychiatry, said that transgenderism is a mental disorder that merits treatment, that sex change is biologically impossible, and that people who promote sexual reassignment surgery are collaborating with and promoting a mental disorder. This is not Mike saying it. This is the former psychiatrist in chief for Johns Hopkins Hospital. And so, excuse me, Dr. Rosie, where's the pork O'Donnell? Or George, I was a Star Trek actor 57 years ago to K. But between your non-existent PhDs and the former psychiatrist in chief of Johns Hopkins Hospital, I'm going to go with him. And again, for those that came in late, the former psychiatrist in chief for Johns Hopkins Hospital said is that transgenderism is a mental disorder that merits treatment, and that sex change is biologically impossible, and that people who promote sexual reassignment surgery are collaborating with and promoting a mental disorder. Dr. McHugh, the author of 6 books and at least 125 peer-reviewed medical articles, made his remarks in recent commentary in the Wall Street Journal where he explained that transgender surgery is not the solution for people who suffer a disorder of assumption. The notion that their maleness or femaleness is different than what nature assigned to them biologically. He also reported on a new study showing that suicide rates amongst transgendered people who had reassignment surgery, listen to this. Again, all of you bleeding hearts who were calling the decision by the president to ban transgender persons from the armed forces, who keep going on, oh, hateful and bigoted and hateful. Listen to this, you bleeding heart. The suicide rate among transgendered people who had reassignment surgery is 20 times higher than the suicide rate among non-transgender people. Dr. McHugh further noted studies from Vanderbilt University. I know, it's not Phoenix Online. But you know what? Vanderbilt, pretty notable, renowned university. And London's Portman Clinic of children who had expressed transgender feelings, but for whom over time, listen, and again, this is what makes my skin crawl. Listen to this. 70 to 80% of children who express transgender feelings spontaneously lost those feelings over time. So, if you tell me that parents who start injecting hormones into their 5 or 6-year-olds to change them from boys to girls or girls to boys because they say they felt like a girl or a boy at some point, if you're telling me those people shouldn't be in court and tried for child abuse, then I will point you to the studies of Vanderbilt University and London's Portman Clinic. 70 to 80% of children who said, I feel like a girl today, mama, lose those feelings over time. But you have people who have lost reason in this nation. You have people who have lost all sense of logic in this nation. And the first time a little girl plays with a G.I. Joe, here comes the hormone therapy. Because mama has a secret desire to be famous, and nothing's going to make you famous faster than destroying your child's life forever. Than being among the first to be an open-minded and tolerant and non-bigoted mother who injects hormones into a child. Stage in life should be doing nothing more than playing with their toys and learning the alphabet. While the Obama administration, Hollywood, and major media such as Time magazine promote transgenderism as normal, you don't say. Because, again, so many PhDs in Hollywood, the Obama administration, and Time magazine, all of them psychiatrists. Who's Johns Hopkins? Played a psychiatrist on television once. That's enough for me. Rosie Where's the Ham O'Donnell interviewed a psychiatrist one time. There she goes. That Doctor Who? She interviewed a psychiatrist. She is more than capable of coming to the conclusion that transgenderism is normal. Anyway, Dr. McHugh, who is an actual doctor, said, these policymakers and the media are doing no favors either to the public or the transgendered by treating their confusions a right in need of defending rather than as a mental disorder that deserves understanding, treatment, and prevention. This intensely felt sense of being transgendered constitutes a mental disorder in two respects. The first is that the idea of sex misalignment is simply mistaken. It does not correspond with physical reality. Ta-da! So what the good doctor is saying, for those of us who do not have PhDs and who are not the head of psychiatry at Johns Hopkins, is that just because you feel like a girl, it don't make you a girl. Just because you feel like a boy, it don't make you a boy. You are the gender that you were biologically born to be, and no, gender is not a spectrum. X chromosome, Y chromosome, science is so clean. I'm gonna blow a gasket pretty soon. I'm gonna keep reading this. I like this doctor. If I ever run into him, I'll buy him a cup of coffee. This, let's start here. The first is this idea that sex misalignment exists. It doesn't. It's a confusion. It's a disorder. It needs to be treated. It doesn't need to be encouraged. It doesn't need to be enabled. The transgendered person's disorder, said Dr. McHugh, is in the person's assumption that they are different than the physical reality of their body, their maleness or femaleness as assigned by nature. So the man isn't a zealous right-wing Christian. He didn't go as assigned by God. The man is a psychiatrist, likely agnostic, perhaps a believer. So he says nature assigned your maleness or femaleness. Just because you don't like it, don't mean it's going to change. It is a disorder similar to a dangerously thin person suffering anorexia, who looks in the mirror and thinks that they're overweight, said McHugh. I once thought I was anorexic, but then I realized I was just fat. Anyway, Jeff's going to appreciate that one because he likes my jokes. This assumption that one's gender is only in the mind regardless of anatomical reality has led some transgendered people to push for social acceptance and affirmation of their own subjective personal truth, said Dr. McHugh. Dr. McHugh seems like a brilliant man. As a result, some states, California, New Jersey, and Massachusetts, have passed laws barring psychiatrists, even with parental permission, from striving to restore natural gender feelings to a transgender minor. Of course they did, because it's a lot easier to pump them full of hormones and, make them think they're a girl. The pro-transgender advocates do not want to know, said McHugh, that studies show between 70 and 80% of children who express transgender feelings spontaneously lose their feelings over time. This is key. This is important. 80%. If you don't think that 70 to 80% is a big deal, I'll put 1,000 M&Ms in front of you. And I'll say 70 to 80% of these M&Ms are poisoned. Have at it. Exactly. 70 to 80% of children who express transgender feelings spontaneously lose those feelings. Also, for those who had sexual reassignment surgery, most said they were satisfied with the operation, but their subsequent psychosocial adjustments were no better than those who didn't have the surgery. And so, at Hopkins, we stopped doing sex reassignment surgery, since producing a satisfied but still troubled patient seemed an inadequate reason for surgically amputating normal organs, said Dr. McHugh. The former Johns Hopkins chief of psychiatry also warned against enabling or encouraging certain subgroups of the transgendered, such as young people susceptible to suggestion from everything is normal to sex education and the school's diversity counselors, who, like cult leaders, may encourage these young people to distance themselves from their families and offer advice on rebutting arguments against having transgender surgery. So basically what he's warning against is the school indoctrinating your children and encouraging your children to become gender dysmorphic. Dr. McHugh also reported that there are misguided doctors who, working with very young children who seem to imitate the opposite sex, will administer puberty-delaying hormones to render later sex change surgeries less onerous, even though the drugs stunt the children's growth and risk causing sterility. Welcome to modern medicine. Wow, and I didn't even read this part, but again, now Dr. McHugh's a genius. Such actions come close to child abuse, said Dr. McHugh, given that close to 80% of those kids will abandon their confusion and grow naturally into adult life if untreated. Sex change is biologically impossible, said McHugh. People who undergo sex reassignment surgery do not change from men to women or vice versa. Rather, they become feminized men or masculinized women, claiming that this is civil rights matter and encouraging surgical intervention in reality to collaborate with and promote a mental disorder. So those were the last good words of the doctor. 70 to 80% of young children will abandon their confusion if their parents just let them be and don't start injecting them with hormones and telling them that their name's Sally even though they were born Bobby. So what's the point of all this? Well, basically, it has to do with I guess what Donald Trump tweeted this week, basically that they were banning transgender persons from the armed forces. Now, from what we've read of the good doctor's words, basically those who insist on calling a man a woman or a woman a man, what they're doing is enabling a mental disorder. Now, I don't know about you, but if I were in the armed forces and I was going into the battlefield, to know that the guy who has my back is mentally stable, I'd like to sort of know that at any given time he's not sitting in a trench painting his M16 pink with his nail polish because he just felt like a woman on that particular day. Look, I started talking about this because we actually got a question on this topic. So it wasn't willy-nilly. We got a question on this topic. And after we read the question, we're going to get a bit deeper into this because it's fascinating. It's all about social engineering when it comes to it. It's about doing social experiments on the whole of the American populace. And none of these blowhards, yes, including John the Maverick McCain, who have a problem with this ban, are thinking about the active duty soldier who, would kind of like to come back in one piece and who would be less likely to do so if this insanity were allowed to go on. So, as I said, we've got a question on this topic. And it's from none other than our brother Douglas. And the question is this. Dear brother Michael Boldea, I read this morning President Trump has announced a U.S. military ban on transgender people. He plans to ban them from serving in any capacity in the U.S. Armed Forces. I was told by someone this action was an act of hatred and bigotry on the part of the president. I disagree. This is Brother Douglas's words. I concur, I disagree as well. But let's go on. I believe President Obama's policies of inviting gays into the military and the White House has brought the judgment of God upon our nation. Would you please give a biblical response as to whether he is right or wrong to implement this policy? Thank you, Brother Douglas. Well, Brother Douglas, I don't know if the response required here is a biblical one, to be honest with you. Because if the individual already concluded that the ban was hateful and bigoted, I really doubt that biblical arguments would sway them in the least. Rather, I think it best to employ something that we were talking about earlier, namely reason and logic when it comes to this particular can of worms, because let's face it, sometimes all it takes is a little logic to clarify a situation. So, first off, we have to establish what the primary function of the armed forces is. Now, the primary function of any nation's armed forces is definitely not to run social experiments. It's not to see whether you can get grown men to call a man named Bob Jill, even though his Adam's apple betrays the fact that he's Bob all day long. The primary function of the armed forces of any nation is to win wars and to defend the homeland. That's it. Anything that stands in the way of the armed forces of the nation being at its readiest, at its most cohesive, and frankly absent of distraction, is a goal that we must aim for. I'm sorry, but my job as a soldier isn't to be mesmerized by the fact that Bob is bleeding from his nether regions, or that he's cramping because it's that time of the month. Dial it back on the lunacy a bit, just a tad, shall we? Can we do that? Can we call crazy crazy and not be labeled hateful and bigoted? Can we do that? Look, I'm disqualified from joining the armed forces because I have flat feet. Did you know that you can get disqualified from joining for that? You have asthma, but you want to serve? Tough luck. Nope, can't do it. But hey, are you a biological male and want to slice off your manhood and pretend to be a woman? Why, we must make special provisions for you. Special and unique, and anyone who says otherwise is a bigot. Give me a break. Seriously. There's no hatred there. This was a decision made via deductive reasoning, and the arguments for the ban are logical, pure and simple. If this plan were implemented, you'd have every loon joining the armed forces to get the free gender reassignment surgery. Oh yeah, did you know that? In the old plan, your tax dollars would have paid. Your tax dollars would have gone to facilitate the mental disorder of these people. It would have been enabling these people. Even though the suicide rate is 20 times higher. Just let that sink in. Kind of sad, isn't it? And I guarantee you that these would be the first people to sue every branch of government that they could, because in the heat of battle, somebody called them Bob rather than Jill, and it offended them to no end. That's bigotry on display. How dare you call me Bob? My name's Jill. Never mind the 5 o'clock shadow. Look, sorry, but I don't want the people who get paid to protect the homeland and win the wars that we choose to entangle ourselves in going to sensitivity training classes, training to be their most efficient and lethal when facing the enemy. I don't want the people who get paid to defend this nation to be afraid to act like a brotherhood and act like men often do. You know, a bit salty, a bit brogue, because they might offend one of the new recruits with bandages on their crotch, and they'll file a complaint with human resources. This is getting out of hand. And if this were allowed to go on, what next? That's a good question, isn't it? What next? Why can't the people who think that their cats or dogs be allowed to go into battle wearing their costumes, huh? That's bigoted. That's hateful. I'm a furry little kitten. I want to wear my costume into war. While we're at it, why can't we make M16s dwarf size so they too can serve the country? That's bigoted. That's hateful. They don't make them for dwarfs. Oh yeah, did you know? There's a height requirement to joining the armed forces. A height requirement. A height requirement. We're not talking about people who voluntarily choose to lob off their franks and beans. We're talking about a height requirement. Sorry, but if I'm supposed to go into battle, and on the right of me and on the left of me there are two individuals whose compulsion drove them to butcher themselves, call me a skeptic, but I don't know how safe I'd feel. But what you have to realize is that this is all the left has. This is all the left has left. Everything is bigotry now. Everything is hatred. And they find the one out of 330 million who is the exception and not the rule, and they parade them around trying to convince us that we're better off having people with mental disorders on the front lines, and that the more of this perversion we allow to become the norm, the safer we will all be in our homes. And they just don't get it. The other side really does think that they're in the right. They're ready to have a culture war, not realizing that they're living in a bubble. They're listening to the sound of their own echo. Look, if George Takei is now the voice of the everyman, then I give up. I'm done. I'm over and out. Good night. Good luck. If George Takei is now representative of manhood and men alike, what's the point? Thankfully, he's not. The average law-abiding, logical individual understands the reason for the ban, and that it had nothing to do with bigotry or hate, but rather with the primary function of the armed forces of any nation, which is to be lethal and win wars, not to run social experiments on how much lunacy someone will swallow before they upchuck. I hope I've answered your question, Brother Douglas, and I hope you can play this segment for the person who said it was hateful and bigoted. Oh, what a day. Meanwhile, while everyone's oscillating between having, conniptions over the transgender ban and the Russian conspiracy so void of evidence that they can't even manufacture any, one of the DNC's top IT guys, listen, you can't make this stuff up. You can't. This is a Tom Clancy novel made into a comedy. One of the DNC's top IT guys got arrested trying to flee the country. I kid you not. Tell me this isn't just rich. A House IT staffer the center of a congressional computer equipment scandal, has been arrested by federal officials and charged with bank fraud. And he was arrested, guess where? At Dulles International Airport, trying to flee the nation. Now, in case, you're wondering, a good old American, solid red meat, country-loving name, Mr. Imran Awan, age 37, of Virginia, pleaded not guilty Tuesday to one count of bank fraud during his arraignment in federal court in Washington, D.C. Oh, yeah, he was trying to run a Pakistan after wiring money to Pakistan. This guy was on the DNC's computers. He was an IT specialist for the Democratic National Committee, but somehow the Russians did it. It just gets better and better. Law enforcement authorities for months have been looking into how Awan, or Awan, I don't know how to pronounce that name, may have double billed the house for equipment like computers, iPads, monitors, keyboards, and routers because, hey, it's just taxpayer money. Who cares? Several relatives of Awan worked for House Democrats. Oh, this is so good. Awan, however, was kept on staff by Representative Debbie Wasserman Schultz of Florida. The face that can sink 1,000 ships. Even though he was no longer allowed access to the House Servant Network, why would he need it? He already got everything he wanted from it. So that happened. But, let's get back to Russian collusion because we need to find a way to explain how we lost so monumentally. And in case you were looking for it, we have a Maxine Amo-Peachum Waters update because these are the monosyllabic fools that we elect to higher office. These are the new plantation masters. These are the new poverty pimps. And if there was any intelligence in this woman, I wouldn't be so harsh on her. But when you start talking down to somebody like Dr. Ben Carson, knowing that your IQ level is room temperature numbers, kind of sticks. Kind of sticks in my craw, as the Southerners would like to say. Anyway, Maxine Amo-Peachum Waters was more interested in grandstanding on Thursday than actually getting answers to her questions. Of course she was, because that's all these people do. And you know what? Most Republican senators and representatives are just like her. All they're interested in is grandstanding, not doing what they were elected to do by the people who elected them. While the California Congresswoman was able to ask Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin, or Mnuchin, as some would call him, questions during a Financial Services Committee hearing today, she repeatedly reclaimed her time, preventing him from providing answers. To understand the full birth of what went on, it was hilarity ensuing. But you'd have to hear the audio. I'm just going to read a snippet of just a conversation between these two. Again, this is an elected official who gets paid by the taxpayer coffers. This is the irritant here. Taxpayer money goes to fund this woman's life. Waters began sparring with Mnuchin after he had a question about the hearing rules. Mr. Chairman, I thought when you read the rules you acknowledged I shouldn't be interrupted and that I would have, Mnuchin said to Committee Chairman Jeb Hershlinger, or Hensarling. Reclaiming my time, Waters interjected. What he failed to tell you was when you are on my time, you can reclaim it. Of course you can. She went on to demand an answer to her question about why the secretary allegedly did not answer a letter she had sent him. I was going to tell you my response, he said, before Waters interrupted. Just tell me. As Mnuchin attempted to explain how the Treasury Department has cooperated with several congressional committees. Waters interrupted again. Reclaiming my time, reclaiming my time, reclaiming my time, reclaiming my time. Waters said over Mnuchin. So anyway, this is how it went on. Wouldn't let the man answer. She kept reclaiming her time. I guess she learned 3 new words. Because up until recently, the 3 words she knew was, I'm going to peach him. Now it's reclaiming my time. So, yes, these are the representatives of the people of these United States. If this is the best that we can find to represent the people, we's in trouble. We's in big, big trouble. So there's levity with this presidency. And there's a few things that have been done that are net positives. Because had the other side won, my dear fellow citizens of America, I guarantee you that now we'd have a motion in one of the chambers to paint all M16s rainbow color, so that we can show our diversity, so that we can show our all-inclusiveness, because nothing says, we want to win a war. Transgender soldiers and twinks and pink berets with rainbow M16s talking about how violence is not the answer. Make love, not war. So we dodged another bullet. How many more we're going to dodge, I do not know. But I'm hoping a few more, because my second daughter is due in December, and looking forward to meeting her. And if this nation goes, and we know that eventually it will. Again, I'm not making an argument that it's saved, because it's not. There was no repentance. So when this nation goes, the entire grand experiment that is a representative republic will die. And we're making great strides towards death. And thankfully there's a few here and there that are trying to slow the pace. I know, you don't want to pray for him because whatever, but think on it. If someone is trying to slow down the speed of descent, the rate of descent, maybe that's a good thing. Maybe that's something you should applaud. I don't know. That's just me. But I'm a reasonable sort of fella. Anyway, we've come to the end of today's broadcast, almost. I thank you, as always, for joining us. I thank you for taking the time. Not this weekend, but the next weekend, I will be speaking somewhere in Ohio. So if you want to go to the Hand of Help website, you can find out exactly where. You can reserve your tickets. But I will be here live because we're leaving Friday morning. So we will see you again next week, Lord willing. May God bless you. May God keep you. And I'm going to turn it over to Gino if he's got anything to say. Everyone have a good night, and God bless. All right. Well, that was fun. Gino's not there. Or if he is, I guess he's muted. But we still have 2 minutes together, so why not talk about humidity? It's been humid in Wisconsin. But seriously, the world's in trouble. It's in turmoil. And the fact that this is what some people choose to focus on, and this is their last stand, this is the mountain they choose to die on, it's comical to me. If you ask military personnel, they'll tell you. If you ask them honestly, face to face, they'll tell you that there's a discomfort level there with this entire notion that men can be women, women can be men, and you have to pretend that biology is irrelevant. And it's natural for there to be a discomfort because it's something not natural. But thankfully, this won't be imposed on those who already serve. It will not be imposed on those who've chosen to defend the nation, for lack of a better term. And so, what's the next mountain they'll choose to die on? I don't know. But they're running out of relevant mountains because with each mountain, it seems less and less people are behind them.
Thank you for listening
to
today's broadcast, The Light of Truth, with Michael Boldea. If you would like to order a copy of today's broadcast, please visit our website at handofhelp.com. If you have questions about our ministry, you can email us at handofhelpoffice@aol.com or simply call us at 920-206-9910. God bless you.
Off. Get cute tees and active.